Okay, well, we'll slowly get started, and then if someone else shows up, we can just move on in a bit. They can just join us later. If you are having problems with the sound, don't worry because this webinar is being recorded, so I will be sending it out to everyone at the end of the presentation. All right, this is what I already mentioned before. Please confirm that you can hear me in the chat box, and let's move on. Right, first of all, welcome to everyone. Welcome to this presentation. I'm seeing a lot of people from many different places in the world, so it's great to have you all here, and thank you for taking some time out today to attend this presentation. Now, in the next 45 minutes or so, we will discuss several things. The topic being basically self-leveling epoxy floors, and we will be looking at the 5 key practices that I believe if you can adopt these practices, you will have great looking epoxy floors. Let's just move to the next slide. All right. Now, before we move on, just a few things about myself, just so you know who I am and why I'm doing this webinar. Right. My name is Akis. I have been involved in floor coatings for the last 10 years or so. And as I mentioned on the slide, I do have many failures under my belt. So I've done a lot of projects. I've seen a lot of things go wrong, and I've become much wiser because of those things going wrong. So I'm hoping here to sort of spread my knowledge and share with you some of my failures that will hopefully prevent you from having failures. Please note, I do have a floor coatings company in Greece. This is a manufacturing company, although I will not be talking about this company today. I will be talking about LearnCoatings, which is a company I founded in 2015. And just so you know what LearnCoatings is, I basically founded this online platform, you can call it. And I founded it because I want to promote the use of epoxies and other floor coatings. I just believe that we have a huge problem right now in epoxies, that there's just a massive disconnect. I'm seeing too many projects go wrong and too many things mess up. So I'm hoping with a resource like LearnCoatings, we can just bring our knowledge together and improve our knowledge on epoxies. Now, today's topic, self-leveling epoxy floors. And here is a very nice self-leveling floor. We did this floor in a water treatment facility. Specifically, it's for a factory that makes pharmaceuticals. As you can see, very nice, smooth finish. So first of all, what do we mean by the term? What do we mean by the term self-leveling floor? And the way I define it is that upon applying the resin, the coating forms a smooth and level texture. We're always talking about the coating. So the coating itself forms a smooth and level texture. Unlike, for example, when we paint a wall and the texture is somewhat rough or it has a bit of an orange peel to it, when we apply the epoxy resin, the coating has a smooth texture. All right, let's move to the next slide where we show you an example of this. Here we see someone who is applying self-leveling epoxy. As you see, he's using a trowel to apply the product, and the product by itself is creating a very nice smooth finish. Now, this looks very nice in this picture. Look at this nice floor this guy is making. However, in order to get this beautiful finish, you need to keep some things in mind, and that is what I want to talk to you about today. So, for example, I'm showing here another picture. Here is a worker who is walking on the wet screed. The epoxy right now is wet. He is wearing spiked shoes and he's walking on the screed. And he's using a spiked roller to run the roller across the screed, break the bubbles, and smoothen the epoxy. So he's basically using a spiked roller to smoothen the epoxy. This is a necessary step when we apply self-leveling. A few more nice pictures of self-leveling epoxies before we move to the 5 points I want to mention. This is a floor we did for Nike, the sports company, in their Athens offices. And this one here is probably one of my favorite projects I've done. It was a very challenging project for a fabrics and textiles company. They wanted this mix of white and purple finish. It was one of my very difficult project, but also one of my favorite and most rewarding projects. Now, many things can go wrong when applying floors. I don't want to scare you away from getting involved, but I'm just saying that things can go wrong, and that's why we're here. This webinar is all about preventing these problems. So how can we create this magical finish on epoxy floors? Now, 5 points I'm gonna talk to you about today. And the 5 points are: first point, you need a flat surface. Now, this sounds intuitive, and yet many people get it wrong. Here's an example of a flat surface. The concrete or the substrate, what you're working on, it must be flat and it must be level. Look at this beautiful finish. It needs to be flat. If it's not flat, you will have problems. Here's an example. On the left side, the same picture, flat. On the right side, unfortunately, I couldn't find a better picture, but as you see here, this is a damaged floor. It's full of cracks and dents and just got these big holes in it. Now, if you try to pour epoxy on that, you won't get anything. The result will be just as bad. So before you get involved in applying a self-leveling floor, the first thing you do is you make sure that the floor is flat. Please keep in mind, important point, epoxy is not a leveling product and it should not be used for leveling. There are other products much better and much cheaper to be used for leveling. If you try using epoxy to, let's say, level an uneven surface, you are going to end up wasting so much product, and you still won't get a very nice result. So that's not the purpose of epoxy, and I want to emphasize this. So, next point. If your surface is not flat or level, make sure you make it flat and level before you start adding primers and coats and whatever. How do you do that? There's many things you can do. For example, you can grind the surface, you can use cement screeds. There's many ways. I'd say this whole subject is beyond the scope of the presentation, so I don't want to go into it, but there are ways to flatten a surface. But I'm going to repeat, do not assume that the epoxy will help level the floor. It will not. You'll just end up wasting a lot of product and not getting anywhere. Right, now point number 2. Point number 1 was all about the flat surface. Second point I'm going to make is you make sure that you have double sealed and primed your surface. Now I'm going to emphasize double sealing, and this is why. Here's a picture of someone priming the surface. And I'm repeating here, you can do a double primer, or maybe you can do a primer and a base coat. So if you don't want to do 2 coats of primer, maybe a primer and a base coat before applying the top coat. And here's the reason, the big reason. This is a picture of dried bubbles. So when the bubbles in the screed dry, you get these little pinholes, very annoying pinholes that look horrible on the final surface, especially when they start gathering dirt and it just looks really bad. And this is an epoxy applicator's nightmare, getting these annoying bubbles. And there are many, many causes of bubbles. In fact, I could do an entire webinar just telling you about what causes bubbles in epoxies. But I would say that air in the concrete slab is a huge issue with bubbles. And That is why I am emphasizing double priming, because one way to minimize the risk of getting bubbles that are caused through the slab are by sealing the surface so well there is no risk of the epoxy sort of going into the slab. So double sealing helps eliminate bubbles emerging. However, I just want to repeat, bubbles are caused for many other reasons. They can be caused because you didn't use a spiked roller. They can be caused because you didn't add enough solvent. So or no, sorry, you added too much solvent. They can be caused by many reasons. However, so don't assume that by double priming you've eliminated the risk of bubbles. I'm just saying that double sealing helps eliminate bubbles. Now, let's go to point number 3. Make sure that you fill all your cracks and all the holes in the floor. Now, obviously for big cracks this is obvious, but many people underestimate small cracks. Here is a picture of a worker who is filling the cracks up. Note he is actually walking on coated floor. So we've already primed the surface here, we've done one coat, and now he is filling up the cracks. You need to be meticulous. You need to look into the detail and make sure that all the cracks and holes are filled up, even the tiny ones that look like hairlines, because you may think that by applying a large quantity of epoxy those cracks will fill up, but what may end up happening is they will fill up, you will get a nice smooth finish, and on the next day the crack will have reappeared. So make sure you fill up those cracks. And here is an example. This is a picture I took just a few days ago. This is the last project we completed on Wednesday. And notice all the little green spots. All those green spots are filled epoxy grout. These are all spots we filled up with epoxy because this floor was full of cracks. So notice how many little cracks we filled up, and we did this to make sure that the final product, the final result, will look like this. This is what you want. This is how we get a great looking final coat. Had we not eliminated the cracks, had we not grouted and filled the cracks, we would not have this result. So very, very important. This is how you get a great looking floor. Now, the fourth point I want to make is you want to make sure that your thickness, the floor thickness, is at least 2 millimeters. When I say 2 millimeters in inches, that's about 5/64 of an inch. Now, I say at least 2 millimeters, although personally I recommend that you go for at least 3 millimeters. The reason why I recommend at least 2 millimeters is if you do not apply 2 millimeters of thickness, you will get leveling and smoothing problems. And this is very common when you apply epoxy in small thicknesses. Here is an example of a leveling problem. Take a look at this picture. We applied the epoxy, and we didn't actually notice that it hadn't leveled the floor. And when we went back the next day, we realized that the floor there had never properly leveled. And obviously the customer was very upset about it, and he had every right to be upset because we had no choice but to recoat the floor. So you want to avoid these problems, and a great way to avoid it is, excuse me for a minute, sorry, just got a glass of water. A great way to avoid this problem is by making sure you apply enough product to get 2 millimeters of product. And I'm going to show you one more picture in a bit. The same problem. Here's another problem. Now in this picture, I'd say that the problem is not as big or significant, but you can still notice lots of uneven spots, lots of little dots. Again, had we gone for a higher thickness, we would have avoided this. Now, what usually happens is many contractors are looking to save money and save product, and so they try to go for a smaller thickness. I understand this need, But if you're going under 2 millimeters, you won't get a good looking floor. I hate to break it to you. So you should always be aiming for at least 2 millimeters, although I say 3 millimeters to be really safe that you're going to get a great looking floor. And since we are talking about leveling, I want to make one more important point. And this is, wait, let's flip the next slide. And this probably relates to people who right now are probably based in Europe or somewhere in North America or in the northern hemisphere at least, where right now you're going through low temperatures. Personally, I mean, I'm based in Greece, which is meant to be a warm country of Europe, but right now we're also experiencing low temperatures under 10 degrees Celsius, which is about 50 degrees Fahrenheit. So even we are unable to apply epoxies in this cold weather. There's many reasons why you shouldn't be applying epoxies in cold weather. The most important being that the epoxy won't cure, but also viscosity. The flow of the product is affected by low temperatures. So if you have very low temperatures, you will run into smoothing and leveling problems because the epoxy coat cannot smoothen properly. And here I'm saying you should not be applying under 10 degrees Celsius or 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, there are ways to deal with this. There are ways to deal with the temperature being very low and how to make this product speed up the curing. I don't want to go into this now because we could just go into too many details. But all I'm saying is when the temperature is very low, you should avoid applying epoxies. For self-leveling, the ideal temperature, in my opinion, is between 20 and 30 degrees Celsius, which would be about, I don't know, 60 to 85 degrees Fahrenheit approximately. And a final tip before we move on to the next slide, you want to be keeping your products stored in a cool or room temperature. So no matter what the temperature is outside, whether it's too hot or too cold, you want to store your products in room temperature. So when you have to apply it, you will not have to deal with the problems that come along with very cold coats or even a very hot coat. Okay, now next slide. Some extra tips to improve leveling. These are little tips, but I think they are useful to know. One of my favorite things I do is I like to sprinkle some fine quartz, like quartz sand, a fine quartz sand on the base coat while the base coat is still wet. What you achieve by doing this is you make the quartz somewhat, I'd say, you make the coating a bit rougher in the sense that it will be easier for the coating on top to bond with the underneath coating. So by having a slightly rough surface with some quartz, you'll find that the self-leveling floor will kind of level better and will bond better with the underneath layer. So it's always good to sprinkle fine quartz. Don't go for big quartz sand because it may end up protruding and it will destroy your floor. So go for fine quartz. And you can always adjust the fillers or the solvent to improve the flow of your product. Now, I don't want to go into detail because every product is different. All I want to say is by decreasing fillers, you can usually get your product to flow a bit better. And by increasing solvent, you can maybe do the same thing. However, I don't advise adding too much solvent in a product, in epoxies, because you may run into other problems like getting more bubbles. So always treat fillers and solvent, always speak to the manufacturer of your products, find out what they recommend, and don't go too far out of the recommendations because you will run into problems. Right, final fifth point that I want to talk to you is you need to eliminate all the dust and the dirt in the workspace. And the reason why you need to eliminate dust and dirt is because if you don't, the dust and the dirt will end up being trapped in the coat, and that will affect the finish of your epoxy. So you want to make sure that you eliminate all dust and dirt. First of all, as I assume you will be grinding the floor, make sure that when you're done, shake the walls, dust covers, anywhere there may be dust on the shelves or wherever. Use a broomstick, make sure dust everything down. Make sure all the dust is down. Make sure everything is vacuum cleaned with an industrial cleaner. A broom will not do it. I'm sorry. Don't just think by sweeping away the dust you've got a clean floor. No, no. You need to vacuum clean with an industrial cleaner. Make sure that there is no dust left trapped in the product, in on the floor, because otherwise the dust will affect the finish of your floor. If necessary, sometimes if you find that the floor is just too dusty, you may even want to mop the dust. I advise mopping the dust with a type of solvent. You don't want to be mopping the dust with water, especially if you're planning on coating right afterwards, because humidity and epoxies don't mix very well. So I definitely don't use water unless it's very hot in summertime. I recommend that you mop the floor up with some solvent. Again, if you think this is necessary. If there's no dust on the floor, there's no need to mop it. Before you start, close all the doors, close all the windows that may cause a draft. And also limit access to the floor. Don't let anyone come in, lock the doors. I have had disasters. I once had a cat. Somehow a cat, yes, a cat, got into the floor. The poor cat left footprints everywhere. It destroyed the floor. And the poor cat had these paws with epoxies. I don't know if the cat ever managed to clean the epoxy off her paws. So I'm just saying these things happen. It sounds funny, but they happen, and the damage was huge. I once had a pizza delivery guy throw a flyer under the door, and the room had been coated with epoxy. So the flyer stuck to the fresh epoxy, and the entrance of the floor was destroyed. These things happen, so always make sure that you close the doors, you close the windows, you don't let anyone in, you keep the key, or if the owner has the key, give him clear instructions on what to do with the key. No one should enter the floor, otherwise you will run into problems. Right, those were the 5 points, but I have added an extra 6th point for you that is also very important, and that is don't skimp on the tools. So the tools you use in epoxies is very, very important, and you should definitely make sure that you don't forget about the importance of tools. As I said before, there's 3 main tools you use when you apply epoxies. I showed you in the early slides the spiked roller. You're going to need an epoxy spreading trowel, spiked shoes, and of course there's many other tools you use in flooring, like paintbrushes or grinders or gloves or whatever, but I'm just talking about the 3 big ones we use for self-leveling floors. Here is an example of someone applying the epoxy with a toothed trowel. Now in the earlier slides I showed you someone who was kneeling down and using a handheld trowel. This person is using a long trowel with a stick. My advice is if you're going to do a large surface area, definitely go for a stick and a trowel. Do not do it with a handheld trowel because it can be very tiring, very exhausting applying epoxy with a trowel for hours with a handheld trowel. Also, you don't want to have your head really near the epoxy and be inhaling all that stuff. It's best to keep a slight distance. Keep in mind, epoxy spreaders, you can adjust their height or you can purchase a trowel according to its size. By choosing the right size, you can also get the right desired thickness of the floor you're going for. So a larger trowel will give you a larger thickness, a smaller trowel will give you a smaller thickness. And here are some pictures of tools, some spiked rollers, and then on the right side, on the top bit, we have an epoxy spreader where you can basically adjust the height by adjusting those 5 little things. Unless you prefer a triangular trowel like the one beneath. So that's a trowel that you can't do any adjustments to it, but it's got prefixed triangular. You can just use the whole triangular trowel to apply the epoxy. Now, I want to show you this picture here because this is a warning. And what I want to show you here is the following. Have a look at this picture. This is a used trowel, and this is a mistake many applicators make. After each project, the plow, you need to clean the trowel. You're obviously going to have to, it's going to get damaged. But after a while, the trowel or your tools are going to be worn out. Now, here's a trowel where it used to be a 5 millimeter trowel. Now it's more like a 2 millimeter trowel because it's just been worn out. If you try applying a self-leveling floor with this dirty piece of equipment, the result will not be very good because this is a used trowel. The floor will not be leveled properly. You will not have a good spread of the product. So you should always be using clean and new equipment. If it's getting old, it's time to throw it out and get a new one. And another example in the next slide I'm going to show you, again with a dirty, here is a used spiked roller. Now notice one thing that happens with spiked rollers is they can sometimes trap little bits of dirt or like little, I don't know, what do you call them, dust and dirt in between the spikes, as you see in this picture here. Now you need to make sure that your spiked roller is always clean, because you may start applying, if you try applying this roller on your floor may end up filling up with little bits and pieces. It happened to me once. I had a nice looking floor. Someone started using the spiked roller, and all of a sudden the nice looking floor was looking dirty. And the reason was because the spiked roller had not been cleaned properly, and it was filled up with little bits and pieces. So again, you need to maintain it, keep it clean, and when it's just getting too old, just throw out the spiked roller and get a new one. And speaking about getting a new one, very important point, as I'm showing you the next slide, again it's someone who is wearing spiked shoes and he's applying the spiked roller. Make sure that this person you always have a spare roller with you. Things go wrong with spiked rollers during projects. I've seen them break down, I've seen the screw falling apart, I see the roller not rolling properly. And if you're in the middle of a project, you cannot stop. You have to apply the product. So imagine what happens if your roller stops working in the middle of a project. Always have a spare brand new roller with you. So if anything happens, you can immediately switch. Twice in my flooring career, I've experienced rollers breaking down where we really did not know how to address the problem and fix the problem. It was really tough to solve our problem. So always have a spare roller with you, because it will save you so much hassle and heartbreak. The time will come when you will need a clean roller. So make sure that you have it. Now, do you have any questions so far? I went through the 5 points. The 5 points were, as we said, a flat surface, a primed surface, a double primed surface, sorry, making sure everything is well filled up. We also talked about leveling and the self-leveling and the fact that you need to go for at least 2 millimeters. Finally, we talked about the importance of having clean tools and the clean trowels. Now, of course, the 5th point that I just forgot to mention was you should also remember clean up the dust and the dirt and make sure there is no dust on the walls and on the shelves. Now, if you have any questions, feel free to submit them in the chat box. And I also want to tell you about our online training program. Now, this is an online training program. Unlike this webinar where you had to show up at a specific day and time to watch it, this online is 24/7, so you can access the program whenever you want with with a login and a password, and you can watch the videos whenever you want. It's videos and training modules. You can watch it as many times as you want. You can go through the material whenever you want. The program has 6 training modules, so it basically goes into learning epoxy floors, and we kind of extend the stuff we discussed today here. I'll briefly tell you what's in each module so you can get an idea. in the first module, which is about the key stages of flooring, we talk about surface preparation, we talk about priming, we talk about grouting and the coating phase. So in surface preparation, we talk about should we be grinding or shot blasting or maybe sanding. Then in module 2, we discuss other things like floor systems in general. So whereas today we only talked about self-leveling floors, in module 2 we will talk about floor paints, leveling floors, anti-slip floors, how thick each floor is, when do we use one floor, when should we choose a different floor. We answer all these questions. In module 3, we look at epoxy chemistry. We talk about the A and the B components and what happens if the epoxy does not dry properly, if the B component was not added, if you have sticky or soft epoxy, and how do you deal with that. We talk about solvents. Should we add more solvent or less solvent in a product? What about water-based products? We talk about many things, and we also talk about temperature. We go into the curing times of temperature, how hot weather affects epoxies and how cold weather affects epoxies. All that in module 3. In module 4, we look at your questions that come up again and again. So people ask me, can we apply epoxy on tiles? Can we apply epoxy on terrazzo, on wood? Can we mix products from different companies? Or can we even coat epoxies outside? Is this possible? All these are answered in module 4. Module 5 is about organizing your team, understanding the workflow. If you have a large epoxy project, where do you start? Where do you finish? How do you organize your team to make sure everyone knows what they're doing? We talk about the importance of investing in good equipment and what types of equipment you need to have for epoxies. And just in general, good work practices. What is important when we are working with epoxies? Now, in module 6, we go beyond epoxies. We talk about floor coatings in general because it's a vast area. It's not just epoxy floors, but polyurethanes are very common. And we compare polyurethanes to epoxies. When do we choose one? When do we choose the other one? We talk about polyaspartics, MMAs, clear coats, acrylics. We kind of touch on each one of these so we understand why we'd want to be using a different type of floor. For example, if you have a freezing chamber, do you use a different type of floor than if you use a standard room temperature floor coat? It's a 30-day refund policy. So if you join the course and you realize, well, it's not really what you were looking for, or you didn't really get what you expected out of the course, you have 30 days to email me and request a refund if you feel that the course is not what you were looking for. But personally, I am convinced that you will not ask for a refund because there's a lot of value in this course. And keep in mind that with epoxies being such the scope of one epoxy project is so large in terms of costs. You know, if you calculate the cost of your product and the workers and everything together, the value of this course really is very good value. And you will get some additional bonuses, which I want you to be aware of. Bonus number 1 is that you will get a checklist of the things you need to do before applying the final coat. So when you're about to apply the final coat, you need to check some things. Some things I mentioned before in the webinar, like, did you close the windows? Did you shake all the dust off? Did you check the entire floor for cracks? So I have a checklist of things you can do before applying the final coat, which will give you some extra security and safety that your project will go well. And a second bonus I have is a list of tools, supplies, and recommended equipment that you can use for your epoxy floor project. So I go beyond the spiked rollers, but I also look at stuff like you need to have dust masks, you need to have disposable gloves, you need to have blue masking tape. So I have a list of all those tools, supplies, and recommended equipment you will be requiring. So finally, a third bonus is I will actually be uploading this webinar to the course. So at the end, anyone who, once this webinar is completed, I will upload the webinar to the course so you can also watch the webinar again and again if you feel that you want to watch it again. Now, I am still waiting for your questions. Does anyone have any questions? Please let me know. I'm not seeing any. Q&A session here. Actually, the one question I will answer one question that people ask me a lot, and that is coating epoxies over tiles. And what I want to say is, yes, it is possible to coat epoxy over tiles. However, keep in mind two things. One is you want to make sure that you remove the shiny, glossy part of the tile because you want to make sure it will bond well. The epoxy will bond with the tile. So make sure you grind away the glossy part of the tile. The second thing you need to remember is you need to make sure that you will fill up all the joints, because if you try to apply a self-leveling epoxy over the tiles, the joints will show. I'm going back to my early point I made at the start of this presentation that you need to make sure that the joints will be well filled up and grouted. This is very important because epoxy is not a leveling compound. I'm going to repeat it again because this is quite important. Epoxy is not a leveling compound, so make sure that you have filled up the tiles before proceeding. So, and then once you've filled up, you've grouted the tiles, then you can proceed. Now, okay, I'm gonna wait a few more minutes. I'm gonna stick around. If any of you have any comments or questions, please let me know. In the meantime, just so you know, you can always reach out to me and email me at my email, akis@learncoatings.com, or you can connect with me on LinkedIn. That's also a great way. With quite a few of you, I'm already connected on LinkedIn. So yeah, it would be great to hear from you. Please let me know what you thought of the webinar. Feel free to send me an email if you want to ask me if you have any requests for topics, because I am planning on doing more webinars in the upcoming weeks and months. So please let me know what types of subjects you would like to hear, what types of things you would like to ask me. There's many more things we can do. I'm looking forward to just spreading the knowledge. And again, if you're interested in signing up for the course, you can click on the link there. Keep in mind, in a few hours, I will be uploading the whole presentation online, and I will send you the link so you can watch it again for a few days. It will be available online, so feel free to watch it again, and you're always welcome to reach out and ask me questions. Okay, as I didn't get any more questions, all right, I'll just stick around for 2 more minutes, and otherwise I will let you go. Once again, I would like to thank you for showing up today. It was a real pleasure. Thank you for taking time out. I also know that it's the end of the year and a lot of you are probably busy closing up your stuff for the end of the year. And for those of you that are going to be on holiday in the next weeks, I'm wishing you, hope you get a nice rest. For everyone else, I'm hoping you're going to get a nice finish to your year, and hoping that 2016 will be a great year for you, and hopefully with a lot of epoxies. So, thank you very much for attending. Right. Thank you very much for attending. I will be sending out the links in a few minutes. Well, in a few hours. Sorry, in a few hours. Again, if you're interested in the course, please click on the link. Have a nice evening, everyone. Thank you very much.